Lebanon is the trap Israel cannot ignore.
The Israeli army has issued evacuation warnings to residents of the coastal city of Tyre in southern Lebanon.
Most people think Lebanon is a side issue, a border problem, a Hezbollah problem.
The Israeli military tried to occupy this town in southern Lebanon.
Tonight, the leader of Hezbollah is rejecting the U.S.-Israel brokered ceasefire as a surrender.
A local front that can be managed after the bigger Iran crisis is settled.
Israel has just carried out strikes.
Iranian ballistic missiles launched from Iran rained down across Israel this evening, sending people running for cover.
But that may be the wrong framework. Lebanon may not be the side battlefield. It may be the battlefield where the whole regional balance of power gets tested. Because for Israel, Lebanon is not just another border. It is the place where Iranian power sits closest to Israeli cities. And for Iran, Lebanon is not just an ally. It is the western edge of its deterrent system. So the real question is not, will Lebanon calm down? The real question is, who controls the battlefield after the ceasefire? Israel, Lebanon's army, Hezbollah, Iran, or Washington? And once you see Lebanon through that lens, the story changes, because this is not only about rockets, it is about power. It is about leverage. And it is about whether the next Middle East order is being written in the mountains of southern Lebanon. The common belief is simple. Israel has bigger problems. Iran is the main threat. The Strait of Hormuz is the global threat. The nuclear issue is the strategic threat. Lebanon is just a spillover. That sounds reasonable until you look at the map. Lebanon is not far away. It is not symbolic. It sits directly above northern Israel. It gives Hezbollah a position that Iran cannot get anywhere else, not in Iraq, not in Yemen, not even in Syria in the same way. From Lebanon, a hostile armed force can threaten Israeli towns, military bases, ports, air defenses, and civilian life at close range. That is why Israel cannot treat Lebanon as background noise, because if Hezbollah remains armed and protected, Israel has not removed the northern threat. It has only delayed it. And this is where the story gets harder, because the same thing that makes Lebanon dangerous for Israel makes it valuable for Iran. Most analysts use the wrong model. They treat this like a ceasefire problem. Two sides fought. Now they need a deal. If the terms are written carefully, the fighting should stop. But after a war, negotiations are not just about stopping the shooting. They are about locking in the balance of power. The side that gained leverage wants to keep it. The side that lost freedom of action wants to restore it. That is the power model. And in the power model, a ceasefire is not peace. A ceasefire is a pause while each side tries to improve its position. That is why Lebanon matters so much, because every clause about withdrawal, disarmament, reconstruction, security zones, and army deployment is really asking one deeper question. Who gets to control southern Lebanon? If the Lebanese army controls it, Israel gains. If Hezbollah controls it, Iran gains. If Israel remains there, Hezbollah gains a justification to keep fighting. If Israel leaves without Hezbollah being weakened, Israel risks recreating the old threat. This is the trap. Every option creates a new problem. And the first layer is Israel's security problem. Israel cannot ignore Lebanon because Hezbollah is not a normal border force. It is not just a political party. It is not just a militia. It is an armed actor with deep roots inside Lebanon and a strategic relationship with Iran. That makes it difficult to remove because Israel can strike commanders, it can destroy launchers, it can hit warehouses, it can conduct ground operations. But the harder question is political. Who fills the space afterward? If Israel clears an area but the Lebanese state cannot hold it, Hezbollah can return. If Hezbollah returns, Israel sees the threat regenerate. If Israel stays, Hezbollah can frame itself as resistance to occupation. That is the cycle. Military pressure can reduce a threat, but it can also create the political conditions for the threat to survive. This is the part most coverage skips. The question is not whether Israel can hit Hezbollah. The question is whether Israel can change the political environment that allows Hezbollah to keep coming back. And that brings us to the second layer, Iran's problem. Iran cannot easily abandon Lebanon because Lebanon gives Iran something geography otherwise denies it. Proximity. Iran itself is far from Israel. Its missiles can reach, its drones can reach, its regional partners can apply pressure, but Hezbollah gives Iran something different, a forward deterrent, a pressure point on Israel's northern border, a way to make Israel think twice before escalating elsewhere. From Tehran's perspective, Hezbollah is not just an ally. It is part of a wider security belt, a belt that stretches through Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and beyond. This does not mean Iran controls every decision Hezbollah makes. That would be too simple. But it does mean Hezbollah's position in Lebanon matters to Iran's regional power. If Hezbollah is disarmed, isolated, or pushed away from the border, Iran loses a major lever. If Hezbollah survives the war with its weapons and legitimacy intact, Iran can claim that its regional networks still work. That is why Lebanon is not a footnote, it is a test. And the test is brutal. Can Israel break Iran's forward deterrent without creating a larger war? Now look at the recent diplomacy. On paper, the logic sounds clean. Israel withdraws, the Lebanese army moves in, Hezbollah disarms, Lebanese sovereignty is restored, northern Israel becomes safer, everyone gets a pathway to peace. But the sequence is the whole problem because Israel does not want to withdraw first and hope Hezbollah disarms later. Hezbollah does not want to disarm while Israel remains inside Lebanon. The Lebanese state does not want to trigger internal conflict by confronting Hezbollah too quickly, and Iran does not want its strongest Mediterranean lever removed through a US brokered framework. So the deal is not just a deal. It is a battlefield in legal form. Every side is trying to make the other side move first. Israel wants disarmament before full withdrawal. Hezbollah wants withdrawal before any serious discussion of weapons. Lebanon wants sovereignty without civil war. Washington wants a process. Iran wants to keep influence. That is why the framework may look like progress and still be unstable, because the document can say sequence process. But power politics asks, who bears the risk first? And this is where the Lebanon trap begins. Israel cannot leave too early, but it cannot stay forever without creating more resistance. Hezbollah cannot disarm easily, but it cannot openly fight without risking deeper destruction. Lebanon's government cannot ignore Hezbollah, but it also cannot easily defeat Hezbollah. The United States can broker a framework, but it cannot automatically make the armed actors obey it. And Iran can support Hezbollah politically and strategically, but if it pushes too hard, it risks widening the war. So every player has leverage, but every player also has a vulnerability. That is the definition of a trap. A trap is not a situation with no moves. It is a situation where every move carries a cost, and Lebanon is full of costs. For Israel, the cost of ignoring Lebanon is a rebuilt northern threat. For Hezbollah, the cost of compromise is loss of power. For Iran, the cost of losing Lebanon is loss of regional reach. For Lebanon state, the cost of enforcement could be internal fracture. And for Washington, the cost of failure is another ceasefire that exists on paper but not on the ground. To understand why this matters, go back to the historical pattern. Lebanon has been a graveyard for clean military assumptions. In 1982, Israel invaded Lebanon to reshape the security environment. But one of the long-term effects was the rise of Hezbollah as a resistance movement. That does not mean every Israeli operation creates the same result. History never repeats that neatly, but it does show a pattern. When an outside military force tries to solve a political problem with force alone, the target can adapt. Armed groups can regenerate, local populations can shift, foreign patrons can step in, and the battlefield can become more political, not less. That is the strategic lesson. Bombs change the map, but they also change the politics. And if the politics move against you, tactical success can become strategic exhaustion. That is why Israel cannot just ask, can we hit the target? It must ask, what political system exists after the target is hit? Because if the answer is still Hezbollah, still Iran, still weak Lebanese state authority, and still contested territory, then the war has not solved the problem. It has only moved it. And now the story gets even more dangerous because Lebanon is not just about Israel and Hezbollah. It is now connected to the wider Iran crisis. If Iran is negotiating with Washington over sanctions, nuclear limits, Hormuz, and regional de-escalation, then Lebanon becomes a bargaining chip, not officially in every room, not always openly, but strategically. Because if Iran can show that Hezbollah remains protected, Iran shows that its regional network survived. If Israel can force a process that weakens Hezbollah, Israel shows that Iran's network can be rolled back. So Lebanon becomes a test of credibility. Can Washington restrain Israel? Can Israel impose its security terms? Can Lebanon's army replace Hezbollah in the south? Can Iran prevent the loss of its most important front against Israel? Those are not side questions. Those are balance of power questions. And balance of power questions do not disappear because diplomats sign a document. They remain, they wait, then they return through tripwires. If this framework is right, then 3 tripwires matter. The first tripwire is the Lebanese army. Watch whether the Lebanese armed forces actually move into the pilot zones and hold them. Not for a photo opportunity, not for a ceremony, but in a real, lasting way. If the Lebanese army can take control without Hezbollah blocking it, then the framework has a chance. But if Hezbollah treats that deployment as a threat, the deal becomes dangerous. Because then Lebanon's state is no longer just managing a border, it is being pushed toward a confrontation with the most powerful armed actor inside the country. That is a very different problem. And this is why the first tripwire is not an Israeli airstrike. It is state authority. Can the Lebanese state actually control Lebanese territory? If the answer is no, the framework becomes a theory. If the answer is yes, the balance of power begins to shift. The second tripwire is Israel's freedom of action. Israel has a clear incentive to keep striking what it sees as immediate threats. From Israel's perspective, this is rational. If militants are moving, if launchers are being prepared, if Hezbollah is rebuilding infrastructure, Israel will not want to wait until the threat is fully restored. But from Hezbollah's perspective, continued Israeli strikes prove that Israel never intended real withdrawal. And from Iran's perspective, those strikes can be used to argue that Lebanon is still under pressure and Hezbollah must remain armed. So every Israeli operation has 2 meanings. Militarily, it may reduce a threat. Politically, it may strengthen the argument for resistance. This is the dilemma. Israel may feel it cannot stop striking, but every strike can make the political settlement harder. That does not mean Israel has no reason to act. It means the strategy has to solve both problems, the military threat and the political cycle that regenerates it. If Israel solves only the first, Lebanon remains a trap. The third tripwire is Hezbollah's weapons and funding. This is the core, not rhetoric, not speeches, not flags, weapons, money, command networks, reconstruction channels, border access. If Hezbollah keeps its weapons and rebuilds its infrastructure, Iran preserves its lever. If Hezbollah is cut off from funding and forced away from the south, Israel gains strategic depth. But this is not easy because Hezbollah is not only a military organization, it is woven into Lebanese politics and society. That means disarmament is not a switch. It is a process. And processes can fail. They can be delayed. They can be sabotaged. They can become symbolic. That is why the funding clauses matter. That is why reconstruction matters. That is why who controls aid matters. Because after war, money is not just money. Money becomes power. The actor who rebuilds homes gains influence. The actor who pays fighters keeps loyalty. The actor who controls checkpoints controls facts on the ground. So the disarmament question is really a power question. Who becomes stronger during the peace? Now we can see why Israel cannot ignore Lebanon, because Lebanon is where three wars overlap. The first war is the visible war: rockets, drones, airstrikes, command posts, launchers, border positions. This is the war people can see on maps. The second war is the political war inside Lebanon. Who controls the south? Who speaks for the state? Who has the right to carry weapons? Who decides peace and war? This is the war that determines whether any ceasefire can survive. The third war is the regional war: Israel versus Iran, Iran's network versus Israel's deterrence, Washington's framework versus Tehran's influence. That is the deeper contest. And Lebanon sits at the intersection of all three. So when people call Lebanon a side issue, they are missing the structure. Side issues do not threaten to unravel negotiations. Side issues do not decide whether Iran's forward network survives. Side issues do not determine whether Israel's northern communities can return safely. Lebanon is not a side issue. It is a hinge. And sometimes the hinge decides which way the door swings. So what happens next? A careful prediction would not say the war must restart. That would be too strong. The public evidence does not prove that. A safer reading is this: Lebanon will remain unstable because the core objectives are incompatible. Israel wants a Lebanon where Hezbollah cannot threaten northern Israel. Hezbollah wants a Lebanon where it remains armed as resistance. Iran wants Hezbollah preserved as a strategic lever. Lebanon state wants sovereignty but may not have the strength to impose it quickly. And Washington wants a diplomatic process that can survive all of those contradictions. And that is a lot to ask from one framework agreement. So the most likely path is not clean peace or total collapse. It is friction, pilot withdrawals, Israeli strikes on claimed threats, Hezbollah rejection, Lebanese political pressure, U.S. mediation, Iranian messaging, and constant arguments over who violated what first. That may sound messy, but in balance of power politics, messy is normal because the battlefield does not disappear. It changes form. The key thing to watch is not what leaders say, it is what they physically do. Do Israeli forces actually leave key areas? Do Lebanese forces actually replace them? Does Hezbollah actually move weapons away from the south? Do strikes decrease? Does reconstruction money bypass Hezbollah? Does Iran treat Lebanon as closed business, or does it keep Lebanon tied to the wider regional bargain? These are the real indicators, not the slogans, not the ceremonies, not the victory speeches, because in a crisis like this, rhetoric is often a performance. Behavior is the evidence, and behavior will tell us whether the framework is changing the balance of power or merely covering the next round. That is why the next stage may not begin with a dramatic announcement. It may begin with a patrol that fails, a withdrawal that stops, a strike that triggers retaliation, a funding channel that reopens, a speech that signals no compromise. Small events can reveal the larger structure. That is why Lebanon matters, because the small details are not small, they are signals. The deeper lesson is simple. Israel cannot ignore Lebanon because Lebanon is not only about Lebanon. It is about whether Iran's regional system survives pressure. It is about whether Israel can restore deterrence without permanent occupation. It is about whether the Lebanese state can become sovereign in practice, not just on paper. And it is about whether Washington can turn a ceasefire into a real post-war settlement. That is much harder than stopping the shooting. Stopping the shooting is one problem. Changing the balance of power is another. And if the balance of power does not change, the old conflict can return under a new name. That is the Lebanon trap. The place that looks secondary becomes central. The front that looks local becomes regional. The ceasefire that looks like an ending becomes a test. So the mistake is treating Lebanon as a border problem. It is not. It is a balance of power problem. And for Israel, Iran, Hezbollah, Lebanon, and Washington, that means the war may not be over when the guns go quiet. It may be entering the stage where the map matters less than who gets to define the next order. The headlines change, the logic does not.